Classic Mario Party. Buy stars, win minigames, and ruin friendships. A simple yet timeless formula that, if recent sales figures are to go by, has not aged a day. It seems people cannot get enough of the wild, unpredictable, and yet surprising strategic shenanigans that come with these games. And I, for one, cannot either. With all that said, however, nothing is more central to the design and core appeal of Mario Party than its variety of boards to choose. You could even go so far as to say that a Mario Party game is only as good as its boards are. The best Mario Party boards are often characterized by winding pathways, spontaneous star placements, and a variety of options on your path to superstardom. With all of that in mind, I say with zero hesitation or irony that Mario Party 7's Pagoda Peak is one of the absolute best boards in Mario Party history. A board defined by its singular pathway, locked star space, and general restriction in options on your way to victory. It is true that very little of this board sounds like a good idea on paper, which is part of why I find its success even more amazing. So let's launch right into it and uncover the foundations that this peak stands so tall on. For context, let's discuss the game that it belongs to, Mario Party 7, and how that affects the design of this board. Mario Party 7 is broadly themed around a globe-trotting vacation where Mario and co. take a cruise around the world and explore exotic locations inspired by real-world cultures, except Bowser's Enchanted Inferno, with locations inspired by Venice, Egypt, Broadway, and of course,
Eastern European architecture.
Pagoda Peak fits right in with its theming of a Chinese mountain monastery, featuring massive peaks piercing the clouds, tall stalks of bamboo meeting the mountain, and a variety of structures like a market, dojo, bridges, and of course the monastery itself at the very top, seemingly levitating freely. But undercutting this serene and spiritual atmosphere is the comedic implication that this is instead a tourist trap, with the mountain being lined with gift shops, and the head of the monastery itself valuing wealth as a virtue, quite contrasting most spiritual practices. In the solo mode, the goal is even to buy the Koopa Master's merchandise. Mario Party 7 is also known for a few unique gameplay features, with the relevant ones here being Bowser Time and the orb system. Every 5th turn, Bowser will become enraged and begin Bowser Time, where he will alter the game status in a number of ways. On Pagoda Peak in particular, there are 4 possible events that can occur, 2 of which are found on most boards, one where Bowser performs the funny but kind of lame stunt where he forces everyone into a group photo, charges them 10 to 20 coins, and refuses to actually give them the photo. Sometimes he even photobombs it. Mechanically, this does really just boil down to stealing some of the player's coins and moving on, though. The second of which is an event where he literally crushes the competition and opens a shop of his own where he forcibly sells the first player who passes it either a worthless item they cannot keep or a Koopa Kid orb. This event, however, actually does have a unique benefit by consequence of the board's design. As in other boards, players can choose to avoid the Bowser shop by choosing another path. But as this board has no such splits, players have no choice but to run headfirst into this trap, unless they are fortunate enough to land on a select few spaces or carry a cannon orb on it. The remaining 2 events are unique to this board and rely on its unique design, one of which involves Bowser destroying one of the 3 bridges for a single turn, which, once again, cannot be ignored due to the lack of paths, save for some few options, and thus can act as a serious roadblock to success if not accounted for. But since it only lasts for 1 turn, it never goes so far as to stop the flow of gameplay and prevent some players from playing the game. Lastly, Bowser can also rock the whole mountain under his weight, and knock all of the players to a lower part of the board. The severity of the fall, and even the order of the players, is largely dictated by where on the board you are when this happens, with some falls being much more significant than others. This has the potential to both halt the progress of those climbing the mountain, and give those behind an opportunity they needed to pass their rivals. Save for one of them, there is a running theme of these events capitalizing on the linear structure to add layers to the complexity and strategy in place of the elements they removed in making this board. As you will see moving forward, this extends to the design of the board in nearly all of its aspects. All of that said, let's not forget the other major gimmick featured in Mario Party 7, the orb system. Technically introduced in 5, but refined in 6, the orb system is a replacement for traditional items defined by its ability to lay down traps on the board, in addition to the existing single-use items that are self-applied like in the older games, such as the green orbs. Reds, however, are traps you can place on red or blue spaces that activate when players pass them and disappear after one use, and yellow orbs are just like red orbs except players must land on them instead of passing. They also do not disappear after one use, and they can be replaced by other orbs. Finally, blue orbs are character-specific and function like the green ones, though usually are more powerful. While there are a number of pros and cons to this system, the only aspect relevant to this video is the unique strategy that comes with orbs, and how Pagoda Peak significantly alters how you think about using them. When placing orbs in Mario Party, there are a number of things to consider about the how, where, when, and why of doing so. For example, yellow orbs only activate when landed on, but are entirely reusable. Therefore, the maximum number of times they can be used is directly related to how many turns are left in the game. So if you want to get the most out of them, ideally you put them down as early as you can. However, often far more important than when is where you put a trap, as some spaces are entirely more likely to be landed on than others are statistically. Consider a split. Before that split, you have the entire pack of players on that path as a potential victim of your trap. But after that split, they can opt to go on the opposite path to the orb you place down, significantly diminishing how likely people are to set it off. Conversely, at a merge, you will get far more players after the merge than before, as you are now getting potential victims from both paths rather than just one. This creates a broad rule of thumb of placing traps on major routes and not branches, when trying to cause people to trip them. Alternatively, you can choose to put an orb after a split as a way of discouraging people from taking a path for whatever reason. Maybe you don't want them going to a shop or happening, or maybe there's a star there and you don't want anyone else getting it. Not to mention that red orbs are only one use and activate on passing, making them far more viable on side paths given they are disposable anyway and are not up to luck on whether or not they're activated. Frankly, there is so much I could discuss about orb strategy that it could make an entire video of its own. But doing so here would be a waste, as the point I'm getting to is that most of what I've described is utterly and totally irrelevant to playing on Pagoda Peak. And not only do I not think this is a bad thing, but I feel that it brings an incredibly unique potential for strategy not seen anywhere else in the game, perhaps even the series. Orb placements matter very little at all in terms of landing probabilities because the board has no branches, and thus 100% of the players will cross this path unless they use a countermeasure. Likewise, strategies involving discouraging players from going to certain parts of the board are also completely null, as players have no choice but to progress through the path as laid out. Or at least, all of this is true on first inspection. I say this because I would not praise this board so much if it was just removing the elements that made the rest of the game interesting. No, this board adds just as much to the gameplay and approach as it takes away, creating a truly unique experience. To show you what I mean, let's further consider the consequences of these choices and the features they implemented as a result. Within traditional Mario Party design, the board gameplay is genuinely rather limited as far as true gameplay interactions are concerned. Because the dice rolls are effectively random, player input is a formality more than an engagement, something to make the player feel involved without them actually doing anything. The same goes for most actions, like moving across spaces, and most of the time even buying a star is more a formality than a choice, as it's incredibly rare to have a good reason to not do so as long as you're able to. This means that in any given turn of Mario Party, the only meaningful choices a player makes, and thus the only actual gameplay engagement they have, is choosing what path to take and what item to use, with the occasional exception of buying an item at a shop, of course. Given Pagoda Peak has no branching paths to choose from, it's not only easy to see how this could be potentially fatal for board design, but also how it puts a ton of pressure on the items, in this case orbs, to carry the interest of the gameplay. As mentioned before, the linear design also removes aspects of the board strategy, but due to some quirks of how it functions and clever choices on the part of the designers, it also adds plenty in its place. Despite being the smallest board in the game regarding space totals, Pagoda Peak still has the typical amount of orb and shop spaces at 3 and 2 respectively. Except unlike those other boards, these are not spread out over alternative paths, but are instead all along one path you are near guaranteed to cross. This means that every player will receive 3 free orbs and potentially 2 paid ones every loop around the board, assuming no shenanigans interfere with it. This is the first way Pagoda Peak ensures players are constantly engaged, by making sure they are almost always capable of using an orb at any point of the game, and by doing so there is rarely a moment where a player has truly no choices to make. To get more specific with these orbs for the uninitiated, every board in Mario Party 7 only has access to some of the orbs in the game, not all of them. While this is largely a decision I disagree with, it is important to consider what orbs the designers intended players to use on this board. The full list includes 10 orbs in addition to the character orbs and Koopa Kit, those being the Mushroom, Super Shroom, Metal Shroom, Cannon, Hammer Bro, Spear Guy, Kamek, Zap, Warp Pipe, and Bob-omb orbs. 2 of these, the Cannon and Bob-omb orbs, are unique to this board in particular. The Cannon orb is a green orb that will launch you to an unknown location higher up on the mountain, potentially saving a small or rather large number of spaces in reaching the top, and a degree of variability based on where you use it. In contrast, the Bob-omb orb is the exact opposite, acting as a red orb that blows players down the mountain when it's passed. Unique to these 2 orbs is how they interact with the verticality of the board, making you consider your position not just in terms of the space it is on, and how far away it is from others by that count, but also the physical shape of the terrain and how far away the nearest rise or fall is on the board. For example, it would be far more impactful to fall from here with a Bob-omb than here because of how the spaces are spread out relative to the terrain. This is a completely unique way of strategizing around board positions in a manner the series has not tried before or since. It is also worth considering what options are not available on this board and why that may be. Personally, what jumps out the most to me is the complete absence of the almighty Slow Shroom in this pool, an orb that effectively allows the competent player to choose their exact roll 1 through 10 for a turn. This is quite the interesting choice by the designers, as this already powerful item would be even stronger on a board where you cannot choose where you are going, and positionality on the mountain is of incredible importance. This makes its exclusion not only a handicap to the players trying to exploit this, but more notably, it is a sizable buff to yellow orbs. Yellow orbs are already stronger here due to the linearity increasing all of their odds of being landed on, but removing the best option players had to ignore them entirely makes them even more potent. This takes the normally somewhat meek yellow orbs and turns them into a terrifying threat. This is compounded by the fact that there are less spaces on the board total, meaning they will fill up faster than usual, leaving less safe spaces available, on top of also the aforementioned abundance of items. While replacing an opponent's space with your own is always an option, it is often better to allow it to remain, as only 25% of the time will it hurt you, compared to the 50% of the time that it can harm opponents. Not to mention that one of the 3 available yellow orbs is the Kamek orb, an item that steals 3 of another player's traps and makes them your own. Why remove spaces that in a turn or 2 could instead become your own? That said, Kamek orbs usually pose more risk than benefit by allowing them to stay, so while I don't normally condone deleting other players' traps, it is often the best play to do so if it is a Kamek space. That of course is easier said than done, as you can only know what the trap is by having memorized it, as the game will give you no visual cue, putting pressure on the players to pay extra attention to where and when those are placed. And on top of all of that, none of what I said takes into account what places each player is in, and how that affects your decisions on targeting. Sure, that trap is only a money-stealing one, but the owner is the richest player in the game, and is it really helping me if my opponents keep giving him money? Maybe then I should replace it. Or alternatively, that may be a Kamek orb, but it's owned by someone who has next to no traps on the board. Perhaps by leaving it, the player who has monopolized the board's trap locations could lose some of their control. Even if not to you, losing it at all could be a good thing. This all may make yellow orbs sound terrifyingly powerful on this board, but this neglects a few points to consider. The first being that, of course, if you are ever so worried that you will land on one, you can just get rid of it. Another being the ability to use movement items to outrun a dangerous one if it's too close for comfort. And lastly, another point of interest is that by far the most dangerous of the yellow orbs, Piranha Plant, who steals half your coins, and Pink Boo, who steals a star, are also not available on this board. The designers seem to have anticipated how strong the yellow orbs could be with these increased upsides presented on this board. An encounter made only the weaker effects available for use. In most boards, yellow orbs fill a role of uncommon but powerful traps. Yet on Pagoda Peak, they instead become a persistent, though less deadly threat, one that compounds in its effect rather than changing the pace of the game all at once. Before we consider orbs wrapped up and the strategy thoroughly explored, may I remind you that we have barely mentioned the role red orbs play on this board. Yes, shockingly, there is yet more to discuss regarding orbs. If yellow orbs were buffed by having less ability to avoid them, then that plays double for reds, as they now have no means of avoiding them whatsoever, save for luck or orb use. Even if you have orbs, very few will help, as unlike their yellow brethren, red orbs cannot be replaced once placed down. If you think that they, perhaps, are balanced around being weaker like the yellows are, you would be shockingly mistaken, as the oppressive Zap Orb and newly introduced Bob-omb are two of the more potentially devastating orbs in the pool of reds. The only saving grace players have is the one-use nature of reds preventing these threats from being omnipresent. Instead, there are two primary methods of avoiding red orbs on this board: the Metal Shroom and Cannon Orbs. The Metal Shroom can allow you to be immune to any you pass, while the Cannon has a decent probability of just launching you past them entirely. Not to mention that some of the characters' unique orbs do also skip red orbs. Because of this utility, having one of these orbs in your pocket is incredibly important as a backup plan, making the choice of what green orb to buy a threefold choice. The Super Shroom gives you the best movement options and consistency. The Metal Shroom is most reliable for avoiding reds, and the Cannon is situationally able to do both, but not as reliably. Considering this pool as a whole, a pattern emerges where, broadly speaking, the green orbs counter reds, reds counter yellows, and yellows counter greens. This is not at all a universal aspect of Mario Party 7, but a result of the unique dynamics at play on this board, and the curated pool the designers chose for this board. I may not be a fan of the limited orb pools of Mario Party 7, but within that design choice, Pagoda Peak is incredibly well balanced and thoughtfully crafted. It is very easy to get swept up in discussing orb strategies in Mario Party 7. So much so that we still have not even properly addressed the actual board layout in any detail. We should probably get on that while my fingers are still functioning. The board begins just above the clouds, with a bridge entering a small market with knickknacks for sale, possibly even a cafe of sorts. The first happening space resides here, giving the player a 50-50 shot of either going straight to the top or the bottom of the mountain when landed on. Either way, it's entirely worth the risk for the potential gains, given how early onto the board this is. Not to mention the blanket entertainment value of watching your character getting strapped to a firework. Past the orb space, shop, and some money-making opportunities with DK and Toadsworth, the next happening space is a gong, one of two on this board. Whoever lands on it can change the price of the star at the peak to 10, 20, 30, or 40 coins. Your timing dictates which of these is chosen, though the manner in which it spins makes it easier said than done to do so with intent. Raising the price is a good way to make things more difficult for the players ahead, possibly even outright too expensive for them to handle, whereas lowering it for yourself can be convenient or even a necessity. Given how early in the board this is, you would generally rather raise the price when you get here, as you are likely still early in the board compared to the others if you landed here. As a nice bonus, the Koopa Master will also give you some coins for landing here. Across another bridge, crossing a precarious gorge on bamboo stalks, the players reach a dojo and a free orb space. Here they find 3 dual spaces are aligned, more often than not leading to players testing their mettle against each other, perhaps even shaking up the game balance? Just past those, however, is a happening space, where the lucky soul will train at a waterfall cliffside to grab downstream coins without falling. With this training behind them, they leap from the roof and swing off a cliffside route, to begin the latter stretch of their climb with the treacherous terrain now behind them. Greeting the latter portion of their journey is another shop and the final free orb of their climb, granting no more supplies for the rest of their journey. Crossing the bridge and climbing the ladder, they find themselves in hallowed ground, greeted first by the second of the gongs. Because of how close to the end this one sits, players are more likely to want to lower the price rather than raise it by this point. With a Bowser space threatening their steps, they climb another ladder to the last trial before them. 2 happening spaces besides monoliths. The first is a flaming lion that, if landed upon, players are challenged to mash as fast as they can to douse the flames. Should they succeed, they will be granted a prize by the master, perhaps even a star. The latter space is upon the tongue of a dragon's head. If you are unfortunate enough to land here, you are launched plummeting down the peak all the way to the bottom, only to have been a mere 2 spaces away from the peak. Those who surpass these trials find themselves at the last 2 ladders, bringing them to the monastery floating mysteriously in the sky, where the Koopa Master waits, giving stars only to those who are worthy enough to reach him. For a price, of course. If you accept, he will not only grant you that star, but also set the price of the next star to the next 10 coin interval. 10, then 20, 30, 40, and back to 10 again. Whether you buy it or not, however, you are then brought back to the start on the top of a cloud, gently starting your journey anew. I may have overdramatized the narrative of this board, but that is part of what's so fun about it. The linear nature of this board allows the designers to tell any kind of a progressive narrative with it, as no matter what, players will always experience this in an A to B format. This makes climbing the mountain not just a gameplay goal, but an emotional experience that is crafted to make fun and memorable moments with friends. The tonality is not only endearing and totally unique in its presentation, but it also has quite the fun edge to it with the cynicism of tourist traps layered across it from the out-of-place gift shops, questionable ethics and shortcuts to this spiritual journey, and the master himself being more concerned with finances despite his seemingly sacred demeanor. Not only does this thrive on its own as a theme for a Mario Party board, but it fits like a glove with Mario Party 7's broader theming around tourism as a whole. While I could go on for so much longer about the particular quirks of playing on this board, like how terrible of an idea it is to place a warp pipe at the start, as it gives players the opportunity to buy stars twice in a turn, I'll leave this here and only bring up one more point. At this point, you may have totally bought my inane raving about this board's quality, and yet may be skeptical of how risky of a design choice this board is. This is fair enough, so before wrapping up, let's take a look at how poorly it could have turned out if any of these elements did not hold up. What if the star pricing gimmick went out the window? Suddenly, the entire strategy of controlling your pace across the board would be thrown out in favor of simply going as fast as you can, as often as you can. As it is, waiting can be a valuable strategy. If the star sits at 40 coins, as if somebody buys it before you, it will drop all the way to 10 just for you. Remove that aspect, and there is no longer any incentive to do anything other than go fast. What if the orbs were not at play and items instead worked like the classic games, not allowing for the claiming of spaces and setting traps? Suddenly, the item interaction the entire gameplay hinges on would devolve into either using movement items or repeatedly spiting your opponents, a strategy that boils down to, if you can, why would you not do it? If you have the choice to go fast or not, why not? If you have the choice to rob a player or not, why not? Especially if combined with the prior condition, there becomes very little intrigue to using items. And as I said before, this board design lives and dies by its item utility. Now let's imagine that instead of needing either luck or specific items to get ahead on this board, you could pay an incredibly low fee at regular points on the board to skip more than half the length with zero catch. Once again, why would you not? Even going the long way to get more items would not generally be worth the wasted time that could be spent buying more stars. Some of you may have caught on to what I'm referencing here, but in case you were not in the loop, this hypothetical board design is anything but hypothetical. Just one game later, in Mario Party 8, they did everything I just described and more with Goomba's Booty Boardwalk, a board defined by its lack of alternative paths, ease of skipping the majority of the board, And even for who the hell knows what reason, stars that cost 0 coins. This board is a tepid and trite experience to say the least, having very little of note in gameplay or theming to engage the players. To risk being needlessly harsh to a party game for families, the board quite literally has no value as anything other than the definition of a time waster. While this example may be extreme, even changing Pagoda Peak half as much as this board does would have some damning consequences for the fun factor. I say with zero hesitation that Pagoda Peak balances on a spire of good choices, that if any are removed, risk toppling over like a long-running game of Jenga. It is for these reasons that, amongst many more, that I cannot help but be incredibly impressed by Pagoda Peak, managing not only to work within its bold choices, but thrive as well. Across the entirety of the series, there is quite literally only one other board that manages to succeed without branching pathways, if you ask me. And for the sake of my sanity, that board is a topic for another day.
Why is Pagoda Peak so awesome?
Well, I could make an entire video essay talking about that.
Should do it.
Okay. Get us to 1,500. I'll make it within like 2 weeks.
Will you?
If we make it that high, yes.
Feels nice to finally reach
For
that
you.
point.
That's good.
Also, I will
Always
make,
nice to have savings.
I will make it clear, by the way, that even though that was a joke about the whole video essay in 2 weeks if you make the whole $1,500 thing, if you guys seriously somehow pull that off, I'm gonna do it. I don't care. Because I don't see how that's happening, but if you do, I will be a happy man. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'd also like to remind people, because my sister is very adamant about it, if we get another 141-ish dollars, we will be getting to 1,500, where, yes, I will have to make a video essay about why Pagoda Peak is a good board within 2 weeks. Again, I can't believe that's now kind of being formalized as a goal, but we're actually kind of close enough to treat it with some degree of legitimacy.
Also, thank you, Ron. He got New Wave Bossa Nova. Does that mean
Darth
I could
Pippin
actually...
donated $150?
Oh my god!
Are you serious? Did I just say that just to have it guaranteed on me right now?
Holy smokes.
I was
Donated
what?
that?
So the funny thing about this is my sister just DM'd me asking if I was still in there because she knew it was about to end, but she couldn't check because she's in a meeting. And when I told her, she's like, "Okay, didn't want to do this if you weren't online," and then that happened.
Thank you to Red Sister
Are
so
you
much.
serious?
That's amazing.
Of all timings! Oh my god!
Thank you.
I'm not even mad! What?
By the way.
Thank you so much! Just what the...
I think in
Oh, wait,
response to that,
no, we have a
should do...
donation goal we just posted through. We have a donation goal that we just posted through.
Let's
That
do our
is very
Beetle thank
appropriate.
you. Okay?
Yeah.
Oh yeah!
So, everybody, in your best Beetle impression, we're gonna say thank you on 3, okay?
Alright.
1, 2, 3.
Thank you! Thank you all so much for watching. This took a little longer than expected, but things have been a little complicated since the end of that charity live stream. And speaking of which, I'd like to thank everybody who was involved with that for all of their support. Whether you were there in person, or if you were a donator, or even if you're just watching, thank you for helping out. I know I said a lot of thanks on the stream, but it really means a lot, and the $1,650 we raised is going to a very good cause. This video took a lot of work to make, but honestly, I'm really proud of it, and if you'd like to see anything else from me, if I ever want to post anything, it'll be on this channel. I'm also working on game development. I'm currently working on a Mario Party-inspired game, actually, called Of Dice and Men. If you're interested in learning more, please check the link in the description. And with that, I'll see you guys some other time. Thanks for watching.